message. In the English ministry part, we've been talking about relationships before I left. And today I want to talk about one of the most important things for us to know. And it's something that you may already know, but hopefully the way that we talk about it this morning will give you some practical advice on how to really have this amazing foundation for a relationship with everybody. So this morning I want to go ahead and start out by looking at the passage. It's a passage that I think when you look at it, you may have understood it in one way, but I want to pull something out a little bit different from it. And I've always looked at it in one way, and I realized that over the years that there's a lot more to it than what I originally thought. So we're going to be looking at a passage that actually occurs in several of the Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And today we're going to be looking at the version that comes out in Luke chapter 6. And these are the words of Jesus in a sermon. And here's what he says in Luke 6, verses 32 through 36. Luke chapter 6, verse 32 through 36. Let me read this to you. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Many, many years ago, I had a pastor, an older pastor who was a mentor to me, and he always asked me very interesting questions. And I remember, as a young pastor, he asked me this question, and I kind of had a theological answer, but I didn't have a right answer to his question. And he said, James, do you know the two kinds of love that are mentioned in the Bible? And instantly my mind turned on, back to my theological training, and I thought, wait a minute. We always heard about at least three kinds of love, eros, agape, phileo. And then I thought, but then C.S. Lewis, I remember studying that in another class, there's storge, there's four kinds of love. And basically, one's kind of like this romantic love, one's a brotherly love, one's this kind of God kind of love, and another's kind of a parental kind of family, familial kind of love. And there's these different words that are used for love that are all translated in English to love in the Bible. But when he said, James, do you know the two kinds of love that there are in the Bible? I was kind of stumped. Nobody likes to kind of look stupid in front of a mentor or someone that you respect. So I said, God love and man love. That's what I said, The love that God has and the love that man has. And he said, you're right. And I didn't even know what I was saying. I just said it. He said, you're right. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, can you explain it to me a little bit? And I said, honestly, no. I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at. And literally what he said to me was, yes, there's eros, there's phileo, there's agape, there's storge, there's all these Greek words, there's all these technical aspects and nuances of love. But literally, when you really read carefully and what God is trying to express to all of us, and when you look even at Luke chapter 6 and various passages in the Bible, what you find is there is an easy, worldly kind of love, man love, if you will, and there is this incredibly difficult but high form of love, God love, if you will. And so he would always kind of blow me away because I would be thinking theologically, I was trying to be, smart in my answer. He said, so there is an easy love and there is a hard love. There's an easy love and there's a hard love. And what the world usually goes after is the easy kind of love because that's what naturally we are attracted by. And that's what comes easily and is very comfortable for us to do. But this hard kind of love that is expressed even in the short passage in Luke 6, when you begin to read it, you're like, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think that's something that I want give. It sounds like a very painful kind of love. It sounds like I'm going to give and give and give, and I'm not going to get anything in return. God, why would you say that we should love like this? Why would you say that this is the way that we ought to love and live if we're supposed to be your children, your sons, your daughters? God, can't you make it something different? And this is the way that we would often think. I don't think, sometimes when we read passages like this, we think like, man, God just wants us to do things that are weird and uncomfortable and are difficult. But when you really read and really carefully understand the will of God, what you begin to discover is that this is actually the best way to love if you want to have great relationships, if you really want to be blessed, if you really want to mature, if you really want to have a life worth living. You see, when you look at this passage, it's very interesting to me because it sounds counterintuitive. If you love those who don't love you, if you love your enemies, if you give without expecting anything back, won't you, at the end, end up being the one that's walked all over, rejected, impoverished? Won't you be the one that loses out? Won't you be the person that always pays for everybody's meals? Won't you be the person that always serves and helps other people, but no one ever gives back to you? Won't you be loving but never loved? Won't you, in the end, be impoverished, depleted, and have nothing to show for what you've done? And the reality is when you think about it, a lot of us, let me give you this example in life because I find this is true. Oftentimes, think about this for yourself. I find myself acting more kindly, more giving, more respectful, more patient with people I don't know very well. But then with my children, with my spouse, with my parents, with my relatives, with my friends, especially close friends, you're not as patient. You get more easily frustrated. You don't extend them as much grace. Isn't it funny? Why? And I thought about this a little bit, at least for me, what the reasoning behind it, I think oftentimes, and I've tried to overcome this and I'm still working on this. I'm not saying I've got it all figured out and I live Luke 6:32-36 perfectly. Not at all. I'm still struggling and working through this, but the reason I find that I treat people I don't know as well, or even perfect strangers, or acquaintances, or co-workers oftentimes better, at least superficially on the outside, is because I don't expect much from them. Do you guys get what I'm saying? And I don't really give that much. I may give a little bit of kindness, but I might not ever see them again. Or I'm not that connected with them. I only see them once a week. Or I only have to deal with them at work or at school or here or there. And so to be polite, to be kind, to be patient is not that hard. But your mom and your dad, your sister, your brother, your children, your parents, your spouse, you see them all the time. And to do this all the time to them would cost you a great deal. And that's why I find that sometimes we're more patient, more kind, more lenient, more loving, at least externally seeming, to those that we don't know well and we don't spend a lot of time with. We went on this long vacation, not so much because we wanted to go on vacation, I mean we did, but part of it was because it was my mom, well most of it was because it was my mom's 80th birthday, and my sister kind of arranged it, and so a bunch of our family, my mom's sisters and their husbands and their kids, and then grandkids came from Korea. My sister is living in Hong Kong, working there, and she came from Hong Kong. And then a few of us, my family, and a few others came from the U.S., and then we all met in Hawaii, in Kauai, and an island there. We stayed in a house together. And I don't know how it is with your family, but with my family, if you ever get together with all your extended family that you know well, and you get together for any period longer in a closed space for more than 2 or 3 days, you get on each other's nerves. All the little quirks, all the little things that bother you. It's okay when you first greet them and you see them. I haven't seen some of my relatives in a year or a couple of years, and so you hug them and you catch up and you have a good conversation. You're eating food, you're doing all these things, and then all of a sudden the little things that bother you start to surface and stress you out. and there's nowhere to escape. Because Kauai is a small island. And the house, we all stayed in one house together. There was 14 of us on the first week. And half of them were over 60 years old. And I'm like getting towards that end too, right? And the older ones all have to have what they had to have to eat. They needed Korean food. They needed like kimchi. I'm serious. My relatives from Korea, the older ones, they brought, I'm just going to use Korean. Doenjang, gochujang, 멸치, kim, kimchi. They brought kimchi in their luggage. I'm like, oh my gosh. How many laws did we break here, you know? You can't take, produce and other kind of, right? That was all in their luggage and sit there. So, and my sister who, rented a job, oh my gosh, this house is going to be, they're going to charge me more for, this. Anyway. So, in the evenings, I'm in this house in the gourmet kitchen, so, I like to cook. One of my other cousins likes to cook, and so we were having all this food, and they were kind of like, oh, can I have my steak well done? You know how I hate that, right? So I'm like cursing at my aunt and uncle, and they go, oh my gosh, they think this perfectly good piece of meat, and they want it well done, We made scallops of this. Can you cook it more? You don't cook scallops more. You know what I'm saying? It was just like ridiculous, right? And then I was like, is there any pop? Is there any kimchi? That's just on the food level, right? And I'm not going to say who, because you might end up meeting, but one of my aunts, this is Hawaii, and I think the owner wanted nobody to wear shoes inside the house, right? And so we all had flip-flops and sandals that we put outside, and then we'd walk barefoot inside. And she would just wear anybody's sandals or flip-flops inside the house and leave them somewhere else. Everybody, where's my shoes? Where's my shoes? And sometimes she'd be wearing one of one person's and one of another person. I'm serious. I'm not joking. Catherine can attest. All over, and then we all be like, Aunt so-and-so. We won't say, and she knows exactly what I'm talking about, and that's what she'd be doing. And then she would take things and move them from one place to another, and another thing. And she'd say, oh, I don't know who this is. And she would use anything that you left out, she would just use it. Soap, shampoo, whatever. And she goes, oh, I like this. And then what was funny, I don't want to be too harsh on her, but what was funny was on one of the first nights we got some balsamic. We got all these groceries and stuff like that. And so we got balsamic vinegar. And it was actually this really cute little bottle, like round and with a long neck. And because we made chimichurri and we made salad and other things like that. And we got red wine vinegar. And then she said, oh, that vinegar, I really liked it. I'm going to take it back for some of my friends as gifts from things. And then we're like, okay. So my cousin and I, when we were on a grocery run, we got her like 6 bottles of it, and we brought it back. And she said, no, that's not it. I said, yeah, this is it. She goes, no, it's on like these tiny little bottles. I'm like, what? And so she totally missed, and then she insisted. And then she actually got mad at my cousin because he started getting frustrated. No, this is it. And they were like fighting back and forth. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I came back to her later and I said, this is all that they have in the market. This must be it. And she said, but it's too big. Can you get smaller bottles? And I said, no, this is all that there is, right? And so we took the 6 bottles, and we went to another grocery run, and we returned them. And then we came back, and she goes, where's the bottles? So we returned them. And she said, well, I'm still going to take 2, so we have to go back. Being with family and loved ones, you need a vacation afterwards. What am I getting at? When Jesus is talking about love those, not just those who love you, but your enemies, you know what? Sometimes the people that frustrate you the most, maybe the people in the same house as you. Something about that happens. And so this morning, the advice that Jesus gives here isn't just about those people that just, that you can't stand at school or at work or somewhere else out there. No, it's not always like that. But it's also principles that we need to learn in order to be able to have great relationships. So let me just start out by saying this. These 2 kinds of love, easy and hard, there is a way that we are called as sons and daughters of God. We're called to this hard kind of love, but there is an incredible benefit that comes. All of our relationships get better. All the stress that we experience gets reduced. And we become agents of increasing, improving relationships, but blessing others, and God in turn blesses us. I can tell you that from practical experience. But see, when you read the Bible, a lot of people think like, God says, don't do this, don't do that. There's so many no's. But you know what God says? He says, avoid these things, because if you avoid these things and you do the things that I tell you, your life will be better. But the problem is that we don't quite believe it. It seems unbelievable that the advice that God gives, that Jesus gives, will actually work. And so we stubbornly cling to our common sense in the way that we want to do things. We want to love the people that love us. We want to give back to the people that give to us. We want reciprocation. And another way to say this, easy and hard love, is maybe more simpler to understand, is most of us love because that person is lovable. Because that person gives back to me. Because I gain something. Because of what I get out of loving that person. But God says we have to learn how to love in spite of. We have to learn to love even though. We have to love anyhow. Anyway. Jesus says this in the very beginning. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Of what benefit is that to you? You say, well, that sounds like a really good thing. I love someone, they love me back, we reciprocate. But the problem is that that's a very conditional love. And that's why there's so many divorces. There's so many breakups. There's so many estranged children and parents. There's so many brothers and sisters who no longer talk to one another. Why? Because we always perceive that somebody else did something to me. My sister is about a year and a half older than I, and the last time that we lived together was in 1983 when she was a senior in high school. And since then, we've never lived under the same roof. We've actually never lived with our parents again. Ever since then, we just kind of lived on our own. I went to college, got a job, got married, had kids, etc., etc. She went to college, grad school, got a job. She lived in New York, she lived in Europe, she lived in different places, and now she lives in Korea, and then now in Hong Kong. And she's like the director of Asia for this French bank, commercial bank. And so she's kind of high up there, and she's wealthy and all these things, and she's never been married. And so she's always been the oldest cousin. She's my older sister. So she's kind of the head honcho, if you will. And she's the head honcho at our workplace. She's been the head honcho every time, always, right? I'm just telling you who she is, okay? And for me too, as I've grown up, I went from the little brother to becoming the head of a household, the head of a church. I became the head honcho. And so when we get together every once in a while, it's okay, but we clash. And it's funny because both of us, we talked about this, but we revert back to like high school days. I mean, I guess it's good in the sense that we stay young, but there's also an immaturity that follows our relationship. And after spending 2.5 weeks with her, towards the end of it, we had this one big blow. And for one day, we didn't talk to each other. And then finally, I went up and I talked to her. You see, when Jesus says here, what benefit is it to love those who love you? What happens is if I only love my sister because she's lovable, because she acts in a way that I think she ought to, then our relationship will eventually break down. See, when we had our blowout, in my mind, all these things that she was doing intentionally to upset me, that she'd always done forever. Isn't it funny? It doesn't matter how old you get, but your siblings and your parents can do the same things and push the same buttons. No matter how old you get, trust me. Okay, I'm going to be 50 and she's already 51 right now. I still can do it. And when I went to go talk with her, she said, oh my gosh, you did all these things, and we were just talking about it. And from both of our perspectives, the other one was acting in unreasonable, unloving kinds of ways. How's that cycle get broken? Because you choose to love the hard way. You choose to love anyway. You choose to love even when that person doesn't seem to be loving towards you. I am not saying that when someone is abusive or when someone really is doing things that are horrendous and horrible that you just kind of stay within that, especially when you're younger. But as an adult, you can choose to say, hey, I set boundaries and we're not going to let certain things go. And you're going to confront them because there are people out there who are in your family that are abusive, that are messed up, that have problems. And so that's true. And so you have to set boundaries. But what Jesus is saying is, even still, you have to choose to say, I'm going to love this person in spite of, despite. And you're saying, really? An abusive father? A distant mother? Someone who physically or in other ways abused you? Even then? It says you don't allow those things to continue. Yes, you set boundaries, but that person you need to continue to pursue and love, even when they don't know how to love you, or they've loved you in a messed up, distorted kind of way. There's people in your life that God put, and He doesn't make mistakes. And He's talking about that. He says you need to love even when you're not loved. We need to love our enemies, is literally what Jesus says. In another passage that has the same thing that Jesus says, it says, not only love your enemies, but you know what it says, right? Feed your enemies. I have a good friend who has two boys, and when they're a bit older than my girls are, but when they were young, one was 10 and one was 7, and it just as often happens in school, the older 10-year-old in 5th grade in school had this one kid that just from the beginning of school, sat behind him and kept poking him, spit wads, flicking the hair. You know that one kid, that jerk, right? And so this kid wasn't really afraid of him, but his dad said, don't fight, don't get in fights, resolve things. And so he said, Dad, he's poking me, he's bothering me. I think one day I need to poke him back. What do you think? That's what he said to his dad, family meeting. And it was funny because the devotional that they were doing was, love your enemies, and feed them, and give them food. And his dad's like, His dad, he told me that. I said, I almost wanted to just go out, just family guy, teach him something. And then the little brother was 7, said, hey, let's feed them. What? He says, literally, let's just do what the Bible says. And then mom said, yeah, why not? So what is he like? And then the older brother said, are you serious? Yeah. Well, I know he likes jelly beans. So they bought a big bag of jelly beans, put it into different Ziploc-sized bags. And every time you flicked him or spit water, you put a bag of jelly beans on the face. Amazing, huh? What do you think happened? I'll tell you after. No, I'm kidding. That kid stopped bothering me. They actually became very good friends. They started to talk. The flicking and all of that behavior stopped the first day. Instantly. Okay, I'm not saying, you have a boss that's overbearing. Okay, what do you like to eat? Let's go eat. I'm not saying that that's going to work. But what it's saying is that in feeding your enemy, what you're doing is like, hey, I'm not going to respond the way you respond. I'm going to respond in a different way. I'm going to break the cycle. I'm going to be the one that breaks the cycle. Have you ever had an argument or ever felt toward your parents or your spouse or your sibling or your friend, this person was totally wrong in this situation, and I'm not going to have a relationship with them until they apologize and admit that they were wrong. And you're like, I'm set in my mind. God says, no. I mean, if they were wrong, you're the one that needs to feed them. You're the one that needs to make the first move. That's the hard thing. You have to love and choose to love and express love even when they might have been truly in God's mind. You have to make the first move. The second thing that Jesus says is this: and if you do good to those who are good to you, what benefit, what credit is that to you? it's just going a little deeper. Doing good to those who do good to you is easy. Doing good to those who do bad to you is hard. But it helps us now to begin to behave. That whole feed your enemy is the same thing all over again. When we first got to the Kauai, we rented a car. And when we got there, it was kind of a short line, maybe about 6 or 7 people. I mean, not this long for a car rental place. And so I had reserved it in advance, I paid for it in advance, and so I went up there. And they said, they don't have a car for me. I said, wait a minute, what do you mean? He said, well, if you wait 30 minutes, we'll have one prepped. I said, but why? You guys know, when I was going to come. And he said, we're sorry. A cruise ship pulled in, and because of the weather, hundreds of people from that cruise ship got off and are renting cars to use for the day on an island. And we thought the inventory would come in, but we rented all those cars out and because they don't specifically assign a car. And the people that are supposed to bring the cars back in today haven't come in yet. And one that did come in is still need to be cleaned. And so at that moment, inside for me, I'm all like, I'm tired. And, we had like a crazy amount of luggage. We had like 12 pieces of luggage for 5 people. My mom was going to be in Korea, my sister's coming from Hong Kong, and my girls, and we all had luggage, and we were all sitting out there, and we're like, we just want to go and rest, But inside I said, oh, okay, I understand. That's what I said. I mean, even though I was feeling dead inside, I said, I understand. I said, well, I'll is there any other, And then she said, well, we can upgrade you. And I said, oh, how much is that going to be? $30 more a day. And I'm like, $30 more a day? I'm going to no, thank you, So I said, no. And then she said, oh, we have this car now. It just came in, and it's pretty clean, and we'll give it to you in 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, great. And then she started doing it all up, and then all of a sudden she said, oh, another agent next door just took it, and I'm like, oh. And then this happened, and so we were there for like 45 minutes. And we still weren't, and the car that was promised in 30 minutes still, and I was like getting tired. And then she finally said, you know what? I'm so sorry, Mr. King, and all this time you've been super, super patient. And wow, we have no excuses. So we're going to upgrade you. So we had like just a regular car, just a regular full-size car, and then we're going to upgrade you to this like big. So we ended up getting a minivan, which was going to be like $40 more. And so they upgraded us, and so we were actually in a much more comfortable, larger vehicle and stuff like that. Now, I probably would have preferred just to get in the car right away and the island and stuff like that. But I just, for some reason at that point, and I'm not always this way, not always patient, but I was. And that person noticed. Do you guys know what I'm saying? I had every right to get upset and to yell and to whatever. I'm not saying don't stand up and be firm on certain things, but being polite, being good, and doing good is never wrong. We need to learn how to do that. You know what the most satisfying? I was reading this book a number of years ago. You know what the most? It was saying it had all these quotes about like people who had these little personal fights, and how often that came out in their public life. And you know how this author was saying that one of the most satisfying things that you have to kind of avoid doing is that smart, quick answer retort when someone insults you or says something mean to you. Because he was saying, his point was that throughout history there was all these public figures that in the heat of the moment, somebody that was like on the opposite side of them on a political issue or some kind of issue would say something, and then they made a smart quip because they were quick-minded back, and then that caused them to have this division. I still remember one, and I wrote it down because it was one of the guys that I really kind of liked, and I read his biography, but and some of you guys probably still learn it in history, but you guys know who Winston Churchill is, right? But who you don't know is John Astor, I bet. And John Astor was kind of this political enemy of Winston Churchill. Where Winston Churchill said, we cannot, give in to the Nazis. We've got to fight, even if, to the last man, we just got to do it. Because we have to stand up for what's right. John Astor was advocating, hey, let's kind of, negotiate, let's figure this out. And so they were like on the opposite sides of the spectrum. And so in this book, it was saying how that relationship got really worse. And what he was pointing to was this conversation that John Astor's wife and Winston Churchill had. And they, knew each other in the same circles. And so they're, British are, they're all elegant and proper, right? But they're very sarcastic. And so they're at this dinner party. And the wife comes over, John Astor's wife comes over to Winston Churchill. And she says, and she doesn't say Prime Minister, she doesn't say Mr. Churchill. She said, Winston, I'm trying to use the British accent, it's not any good. If you were my husband, I should flavor your coffee with poison. And then instantly, you know what he said? This guy was smart. He said, Madame, if I were your husband, I would drink it. That's what he said back to her. And it got back to the husband, right? And then they had a feud that never ended after that. I just remember little things like that. But we don't realize that we might have forgotten it. But what one word or one thing that we did that we didn't even know bothered somebody else, they've been holding on to for weeks, months, if not years. Isn't that amazing? I'm sure almost all of us has some either positive or negative thing that some teacher or some person of influence said or did to us. Let's not be remembered for the bad things, but rather for the good things. The last thing that I want to point out to you from this passage that I want us to remember, that I want us to really think about and to gain, and I'm going to end with this, is this. Not only, do good to those, who may not do good back to you, but what we're supposed to also do is this. We're supposed to give of ourselves sacrificially. In verse 34, it says, if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Love and generosity, hard love, anyway love, requires sacrifice and generosity. One of the things that I thought about is that if I love others unconditionally, then eventually I'm going to get burnt out. But it's not true. If you give of yourself, eventually God refills. They may not repay. They may not respond. They may not report. And there's this whole thing about prosperity or, give and it will be given to you. A good measure poured out into your lap, overflowing in your life. I tell you, when you love other people intentionally, when you love other people sacrificially, when you give, when you do good, when you do all these things, you think at the end of it, like, man, I just sacrificed, I just laid down, I just did all these things. And then you might, at the end of a season of doing that, feel like wiped out, tired, worn out. But what I guarantee is that God is going to stretch you. He's going to pour more into your life. He's going to bless you. He's going to provide for you. Maybe not in kind, but there's going to be some benefit that you'll realize that your capacity is increased. That your ability to appreciate God's love and mercy for you. Here it says, what? You will be the sons of the Most High. Daughters as well. But people will begin to recognize, and this pattern will begin to build up in your life. You will begin to learn how, even before you're married, to treat your wife and your children and your in-laws and other family members. And as a result, your marriage will work. Someone once said this, I read it in one of our men's discipleship book. I can't remember which one it was in, but basically the gist of it was this, and I remember this. They said, your ability, your intelligence, your ability to do an interview, your personality may give you the job. Your looks, your vivaciousness, your whatever may attract the person to get you, to be married. All of those things, those external things may get you good friends or a job or married or, all these blessings in your life. But It is character, consistently serving, giving, loving, no matter what, that keeps you in the job, that keeps you in the marriage, that keeps you in family relationships. And the biggest lesson that I learned was this. That in all of this, what we have to decide is this: I will never give up on you. Whether you love me or not, whether you give back to me or not, whether you repay me or not, I choose to love you. I choose for you to be in my life. That's the decision. That's unconditional love. That's what God is calling us to do. And that's why it says we will be merciful and we'll be like our Father who is merciful. He gives us, mercy is giving you what you do not deserve, what your actions do not deserve. And when we begin to do that, we will experience much blessing. Let's pray.